Today's episode, we are going to talk about moderation and why you probably have no idea what that actually is. But first, new listeners, we have a 3-episode rule. First 3 episodes are free. We don't actually charge, but you can listen to those without any ask from us. If you are still listening beyond that 3rd episode, you're getting some value from it. All we ask is you leave a quick 5-star review. You can write a blurb if you want to on there. Tag us on social. Start the conversation. We don't do any ads. We don't bring in sponsors. We are our own sponsors. So our goal here is to provide as many free tools as we can. And if you're getting value, then someone else is probably going to get some value too. So if you can share that and help us grow this audience, it's greatly appreciated. That is a win-win for all sides.
We did get some new reviews in the most recent ones,
Ayo.
but you're not going to be happy.
Why?
Well, you're going to be happy, but great content. Josh has a lovely deep voice, but it's harder to hear. So make sure your mic is turned up this week. Usually
Was that from the past week? These have been...
yeah, this is the newest one. Usually it's me that's quiet. So just make sure your mic is
Well, it's a
turned up.
fine line on this thing. Like right now, if I talk like this, I'm in the yellow and the orange. So I don't know if I'm moving my head. I'll pull this in.
Yeah, you're probably moving your head away. I would come even closer. Thank you for the feedback. We do appreciate it.
Love you guys. Constructive criticism is always cool. But
So
make sure there's still 5-star reviews.
that was a 5-star.
Very good.
Let's dive in, shall we?
So I've got a bone to pick with the entire industry. We've got a lot of bones to pick with a lot of people. But this is, the thing that is so difficult about what we do, and we're doing a rebrand right now. We were paying tens of thousands of dollars to reinvent our website and our messaging. And not to say that what we do is going to change at all, but to have a
Keep up with
bolder take.
Well,
I don't know I don't know how to say it, but the reason it's so difficult for what we do is because the way we do things is not sexy, but it's the right way. The reason people are on this roller coaster up and down year after year, see your results fall back off, is because they jumped in for that sexier thing. You can do this in 30 days. You can do this in 90 days, but you can do this extreme for this short period of time to achieve a short-term goal. And then once that goal is achieved, you're not going to maintain that protocol, so you don't maintain the result.
And that's an issue with social media. That's an issue with everything. Like everybody's trying to just capture your attention and keep you engaged and always be putting out like the new fresh movement you should be doing or the new diet or the new thing to focus on. And everything is very like eye-catching and like just trying to grasp your attention. And
I do understand the conundrum because
Right.
you don't reach that audience to help them the right way if you're not
Exactly.
capturing attention. So I get it.
You have to do that as somebody who creates content. I think there's a better way to do it than a lot of people do it. That's a whole nother conversation, but that feeds into this idea with health and fitness that we always have to be changing things up and chasing the new shiny object. It's shiny object syndrome at the end of the day. That's what this is. And I think as humans, we are just so drawn to the new thing that we just let go of what the basics are, when in reality, if we just stay in that middle of the road area and in that gray area, you're going to see faster progress that actually lasts versus that big up and down swing of roller coaster.
And that's the tough part. So that's why we're investing so much money in it's technically a rebrand, but it's just we're coming up with a more concise way to get our word out there. We do very well. So again, it's not like our audience isn't there, but we can do better. We can reach more people and we can get more engagement. So that's what we've been focusing on. That said, no matter how we put our message out there, whether it is a little edgier, a little more controversial, the things that we are saying are still going to be of the highest benefit to you as the consumer, to you as the client, to you as the user of whatever you're taking in from us. It's not just going to be, we're going to do this thing to get you in and sell you something or to get your follows, to get your engagement, whatever. And then, whatever happens at the end of the day happens. No, we're still focused on the end game of our core philosophy of long-term maintainable progress. Everything that we do in the short term is going to kick ass for your short-term goals, but in a way that makes sense for you in the long term. We talk about intuitive approaches, different layers. If you've been on a sales call with me, you're a prospect call, you know what I'm talking about. Like the whole process is about short-term progress, long-term sustainability. The problem that I have with a lot of people right now, and people that I respect, I have a lot of respect for them, established exercise scientists, researchers, trying to do the right thing, but seemingly unaware of the actual situation. So where am I going with this? You have all these dingleberries, for a nice way to say it.
As Kai would say.
He got that from me. Fear mongering. So you can do this, you can't do this, you can't eat that, you got to do this specific way. And they're there to just scare you out of doing certain things. On the other end of the spectrum, now you have these guys coming out who are frustrated that they have not gotten the engagement that the fear mongers have had. So they're coming at it with the axe on the other side, saying, "Oh, well, this study says you can, eat nothing but." I'm exaggerating for those of you who are not our core audience and listening to this for the first time. You can eat nothing but sugar, and you can do this, and this will be fine, and that'll be fine, and yada yada yada. To the extent, whether they realize it or not, and maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they do and they don't care, where you are encouraging the negative behavior that we're trying to overcome. Now, I am not on the fear-mongering side. I am not saying we need to make sure everyone is terrified of sugar. We are aware of our sugar intake and our added sugars intake, especially with our kids. We stay aware of that so we can keep it in moderation, true moderation, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But would you say the bigger problem right now in our country and the world is that people are afraid to eat sugar, or that they are eating too much?
The latter.
Hang on.
Okay.
So if we are giving people an excuse, which if you're coming at it from the fear-mongering side, you're saying, don't eat this, be terrified of it. The other side is, no, it's perfectly fine. Keep it in your diet. And I'm not saying you can't have added sugars. Just jumping on that now because I'm waiting for those comments. Have as much as you want. Just make sure you're balancing overall calorie intake and whatever. First of all, people are not managing overall calorie intake if their entire diet is highly refined processed foods. It's just not happening. Second of all, the majority of our country is obese. The majority of our country is overweight. That is trickling into our kids. We've already seen the adult population. Our kids are growing up fat. Everybody, like you were just talking about, you were listening to, was it Mind Pump Sal?
Yeah, Mind Pump, just their podcast.
Sal. It's saying it's the normal thing is going to be just fat. Like it's going to be abnormal. You're going to be in the minority if you are in shape and healthy.
Right.
So that is where our country is going. So I understand wanting to nix the fear mongering, and I agree with that entirely. But the way that it has been going, they've been going about it recently, and it's not even that recent at this point. It's been a while, is to give you the excuse to rationalize to keep as much of those things as you want within your diet. And most people don't need that rationalization. They don't need that fallback, that cushion, that excuse. They shouldn't be fear-mongered. But we need to understand what true moderation is, and we need to understand how to hold ourselves accountable, because nobody's doing, I don't want to say nobody. I don't like having to preface everything that I say, but I feel like I have to now after the conversations I've had recently. You really
do. You have to with social media these days. But I think I agree with you. And I think that the average person consuming content like that, of the people who are you are talking about, not the fear-mongering side, but the other side.
Very highly educated, very smart people who probably have their hearts in the right place.
No, I mean the consumer. Oh. The people consuming that content are probably, you're right, they're going to listen to that and be like, okay, this confirms my
daily morning donut is perfectly fine.
This confirms my current bias. I don't need to change anything else. That is like the majority mindset of the people taking that in. Now, you also have to keep in mind too, I think that most people following those kinds of people,
which side?
Like the exercise scientists and the science crowd, most of them are probably aware and are probably more so like me and you, people who have some sort of background in health and science.
I'm going to disagree there, because people love to consume information. They're reading books, listening to podcasts, being proactive in that regard. They don't like to make changes. We like to take information in and do nothing with it.
That's
even people who want to grow their businesses, they'll do all the courses and read all the things and listen to all the things. But how many things are you actually putting into action? You're just consuming that content without putting things into a strategy.
Yeah, I think I'm just speaking like majority wise, though. I feel like most of the people who follow the scientists and people like that who are like battling the fear mongering side of things have some sort of education around this. I'm not saying that they're not taking action or whatever, but I think most of them, when you look at their audience versus the people who are putting out the fear mongering grocery store content, like even though some of those people are scientists too, which I think is a whole nother.
This is a house of learned doctors.
It's a whole nother conversation. That those people are grabbing the attention of more of the general public than like the science-backed crowd that
which
we
is
have
their
always
frustration, and
we've always followed, which
right.
I think is their frustration for sure. But I agree. I think people like to. I mean, that's just like it's a normal human trait you're gonna feel good when you surround yourself with people who kind of think the same way that you do and kind of operate the same way you do. When you follow somebody who post things you completely disagree with, or even like politically, like if you follow somebody who is on the complete other side of the spectrum, your initial gut reaction might not be to like that person, or at the end of the day
you're going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, you're super uncomfortable. So I think that definitely plays into it too.
But here's the thing, I'll just jump in right there real quick and you can take it away again. But I have opened myself up to people on all, like whether it's political, whether it's health, whether it's whatever, all kinds of, some are extreme takes, but I feel as though, and again, it's through my filtered lens, but I am rational enough to take what I want from each person.
Yeah, but that's not how majority
I
of
understand
the people
that. You want to go hard and you want to be
today.
the extreme, but that's, I mean, we'll circle back to moderation again, but if you can follow everybody and like understand and process, that kind of sounds like nonsense. That makes sense. I like that. I don't like that. On both sides of things, you can take something from everybody and understand where they came from. Even the most extreme version of jump into the health and fitness side of things. I'm not even going to pick someone because I don't want you to jump in and take all of what they're saying. But someone who has an extreme take on something probably did one thing that was extreme that made them feel really good, like themselves personally, anecdotally. And then they researched in and found the data that backed up what they were doing. So they may have some useful tidbits to give to you. Politically, you can talk about the same things, but everyone is so supercharged in their direction and everything else is wrong. But if you can pull one or two little things that that kind of makes sense. I like that. I don't like that. Having that filter for yourself.
But I think that's the biggest issue with social media right now is people don't have that filter.
Fair.
Nobody has that filter right now. Consumers are so like, I can post something so innocent, like, I don't know, what did I post that one time? Our morning family walk in the snow, and somebody had an issue with it because I only post the happy stuff about our family, and I should show more of our struggles when I've struggled and shown our entire infertility journey for 2 years. So like people will have an issue with anything that you put out there. And I think as a content creator, that sometimes is hard too, because and I think that's where we've struggled with our brand stuff for a long time too, because it's almost like you don't want to rock the boat. You want to play the safe route, even if that means sometimes not saying, and I'm not saying we are lying about how we feel or we're not being truthful in how we show up, but sometimes it's like, oh, should I say this a little bit nicer so I make everybody feel like, like it's just this like mind fuck of like, knowing what to post that is still true to you, but also doesn't step on other people's toes. But I think this year we are done with that. We don't care whose toes we step on.
As long as we believe in it.
Right.
It has to come from a place. It has to come from a place of love.
Yeah.
If anyone follows me and saw my stories the week of March 17th, I don't give a shit if your toes are stepped on.
Last week? Yeah.
No.
Well, we'll save that for another podcast. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it is the consumer is very polarized in their thinking. And if it's not something that they 100% agree with, they're like, oh, they got all huffy and puffy about it.
We seek information, and especially if it aligns with what we're already doing so that we don't have to make any significant changes.
Yeah. And that's an issue. That is a big issue. It's something where the state of our country right now, I know I'm bringing it back to politics and I'm so not that person, but it's a great example. And
it's getting to the point where you kind of have to be. You can't be ignorant.
It's a great parallel. Like you have to, I mean, we got to the point where we can't even as a country and as a community in that bigger aspect have conversations with people who believe differently than us when it comes to the political parties. And I think that is not what, I mean, it's not what America used to be, to my knowledge, but
that's what they've been training it to be, though. They want it to be polarized, so you're on this side or the other side, and then you have to buy into these extremes that they're trying to push.
Yeah.
On either radical. It's disgusting, but I think that's why this is the last political thing we're going to talk about. But I think that's why everyone, the normal people, are now so frustrated and tired of it and not having a choice in this joke of a democracy that we are ready for real change, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And I'm just tired of being fed these shit sandwiches. But
But
circle back in.
I mean, that it's a direct parallel to your health and fitness, right?
Completely.
People are so all or nothing with every single aspect of strength training. It's like strength training versus cardio. Last week's episode, it's, doing low carb versus high carb, high protein diets versus, like, people can polarize every single aspect of your health, fitness, and nutrition. And I think as humans, we like to be all or nothing like that. Like, very few people are, I don't want to say naturally, but just like in that mindset of I'm going to live in the middle ground. We have to kind of learn and teach ourselves to be there. Because I mean, the all or nothing stuff, it's exciting. It feels good at first. It feels
You're
like
committed.
you're making this huge change to your life. And maybe you are. I mean, it is a big change for most people whenever they do anything like that, whether it's a certain fad diet or a certain type of training. It's going to feel like a big change at first, and we're drawn to that because we think that big change is going to change our lives super fast and we're going to be who we want to be, when in reality, it's too much change at once. You're changing your entire lifestyle and not letting yourself adapt and not accounting for the speed bumps that happen, or when life happens. What happens then when you can't be 100% on that diet or on that training protocol that you're trying to do? It's like then you go back to square one, you go back to zero. You don't know how to recover from that. So that is why it's so important to fit this stuff in your life, to figure out where that true moderation is. And let's dive into that before I have to wake Cora up here.
So moderation is something that most of us are not very good at, and we've lived in the all or nothing mindset, and we have found our way into the middle where we should all be as far as creating balance within our lifestyle. But this is something that I'm still fine-tuning personally. So this past week, my energy has been atrocious, and we were both in that situation trying to figure out why. And, sleep was okay. Nothing else was too dramatic. But the one thing that I had shifted was my breakfast, and I just figured that out yesterday. So this past year-ish, I've been huge on proteins and fats. I still have carbs, but I think I talked about this last episode. My low carbs is still like 350 grams of carbs.
It's not low by any means.
But I've been having a ton of protein and a ton of fats, especially at breakfast, to the point where I feel good, to the point where it's actually a problem eating enough the rest of the day because I'm so satiated. I feel good. I'm steady. My energy has been there that I'll go 5 hours without eating my next meal. And that screws me up for my overall intake. But the past week or so, we ran out of something, so I shifted what I was doing for breakfast. I typically do like a bunch of eggs. I'll do like 5 or 6 eggs, 4 pieces of sausage. I'll do home fries, or I'll do Ezekiel bread, butter, and then like a banana or a pear or some other decent chunk of carbs through fruit. Ran out of something, so I ended up doing like French toast. So I would still have my 5 eggs, but with the French toast, so I'd be dipping it in that, make my French toast, and whatever was left in the bowl, I'd pour that and eat those eggs. And then I'd have a bunch of syrup, and I forget what else I was doing with that. But it ended up being significantly more carbs than I typically eat for my first meal. And I thought about it just because it wasn't terribly far off, but it was a different ratio than I've been doing. So I'm like, let me go back and see if I shift back to what I was doing before. And it was within a day. The next day, I felt that much better.
Yeah.
So whether it was the spike in carbs, syrup doesn't bother me. Syrup is fine. It's not the added sugar syrup. It's 100% natural, organic,
Vermont maple.
Which I'm usually fine with. But just the shift in that. So anyway, as far as moderation, it can be little things like that. Like there are a lot more sugars in one of those breakfasts versus the other. So whether I was getting that big insulin spike and then crashing and feeling crappy the rest of the day, just because that was probably 120 grams of carbs for that one meal, and I've been consuming probably closer to 80 to 90 for my first meal. Little things like that you pay attention to. So true moderation is something that is going to look different for everybody, which is why we say, health and fitness is not a one size fits all. You can't just fit yourself into this box or have a coach put you in a box. They have to learn about you, and you have to learn about yourself, and you have to collect data. If you're not collecting data like we do with our clients, just take notes. This is what I tracked this week.
How many coaches still don't do that, by the way. I overheard a couple of your calls from last week, and how one client was working with another coach who has her going through a reverse diet, and you were like, well, what else are you tracking aside from your macros and your weight? And she was like, nothing. Like, they weren't paying attention to sleep, stress, digestion, energy levels, her cycle, like all of these things impact what your macros and how, like, everything. So it blows my mind to hear when other coaches are not doing this. I know that was like a tangent, but that was just...
And there's 100 tangents you could build off of that. But the point being, if you're not working with a coach or a great coach who is tracking all of the things, so you have actual data to attribute to certain trends and evaluating trends and talking about those trends over a longer period of time, if you don't have those things, you can just take notes. You know, if you're tracking macros, you've got an app, you can review what you consumed. Is this what I normally eat? Did I deviate? How did I feel? How did I sleep? How are my hunger levels? How am I managing my stress throughout the day? Is it high? Is it low? Just keep a little journal. You know, you should be doing that for gratitude anyway, but you can write down the things you are feeling biofeedback wise and the trends that you are seeing, and then you can correlate those trends to what you're doing. If this sounds complicated, it's because I'm throwing a lot at you in like 30 seconds. But we break this down very simply. Our clients log this on our client portal for our one-to-one coaching. If you can set up like an Excel sheet, you could do something like that. If you want to hop in your computer at the end of the day, you could log it. Like I said, if you do keep a gratitude journal, log it in there.
The main point is what gets measured gets managed. And if you're not measuring anything, you cannot manage and get to that next level without knowing what the heck you're doing right now. So it doesn't have to be this super extensive thing, but you do have to be aware of it.
Yeah. And it's the reason tracking can be such a useful tool, not just for seeing where calories are coming in. Obviously that's a huge part of it, but you can reflect back and look at your food journal and say, okay, what did I actually eat? How often did I have ice cream this week? How many donuts did I have for breakfast? Like, to understand what true moderation is, you need to see like the proof. Like, you can't think back and say, well, I don't think I did too much this week. I don't think I did too much of that. Like,
you have no idea.
You have no idea unless you wrote it down and can actually see the data. You have no idea.
And also, like, I think it's important to reflect too, like when you're first starting out, even tracking, like just get in the mindset of like asking yourself internally, like after you finish a meal, oh, how do I feel right now? Like, I think we're so go. I mean, especially as parents and business owners and just people who work throughout the week, most of you listening, you're go all the day, that we don't really ever sit and think like, oh, how did I actually feel after I ate that meal? Or how did I feel going into that meal? Or how did I feel halfway through that meal? So just
the rest of the day,
being mindful of how things make you feel. And then at the end of the week, going back and kind of reflecting on where those patterns were and how things really impacted you energy-wise, sleep-wise. Yeah, I mean, for me, even this week, not related to food, but just as far as getting my sleep a little bit more dialed in. We talked about this in the last episode. We're in a good place most of the time, but we even still get in our little days where we're watching TV a little bit more before bed, or just not in our typical routine. I was reading fiction before bed, but usually that like knocks me out, and the books I've been picking were just too good, I guess. More recently,
erotic novels.
Josh makes fun of me. I like spicy fiction, okay? But they were too good that they were keeping me up later, and it was like backfiring because I was staying up later to finish reading rather than like using it to unwind and go to sleep. So I went back to reading nonfiction before bed, and that's so much easier to just like read a couple pages or even just a chapter, and then I'm like ready to pass the F out. So just a simple switch like that has helped so much with my sleep in the last few days. But just, everything in moderation, but understanding what moderation ultimately looks like for you is so important.
That's why routine and regimen is so important. Like, you don't have to be structured military regiment you don't have to live like that in order to see progress and be balanced. But having a typical routine allows you to identify variables when you do deviate from that routine. So the reason I was able to identify, hey, I'm very tired, it's not my sleep, is because we track sleep. We've got the Oura rings. And if you know the Oura ring, you can still track when you're going to bed. You can rate how you slept. We have the Oura ring. So every morning I wake up and it's in the mid 80s usually. So it's usually pretty good. So I'm like, why am I still so tired? I'm getting enough sleep. It's quality sleep. So then I reflected back on the different areas. Okay, what am I doing for this? How is training? Am I recovering? Am I taking rest days? All those things are good. Yep. Okay, well, what about nutrition? Numbers are coming in about the same, but how is that shaped? What am I doing differently with my diet? Oh, breakfast. Breakfast is what I'm doing differently. So within a day, rather than wondering for the next 6 months and being, oh, this is just life. I'm just supposed to be tired. I'm supposed to feel like shit all the time. No, I changed my breakfast. Not a huge difference in calories, but the way where those were coming from. And the next day I felt good again. Like I felt fucking great for the last 3 months, felt shitty for the last 2 weeks. And then I realized what was happening, corrected that, and improved it the next day. We settle for what we think is normal. I'm just supposed to feel like this. No, you're not. You just haven't figured out why you feel like that. And you haven't taken the time to analyze it or reached out and hired a coach. You know, we talked about coaching being a luxury. I had that post a little while back about spending $800 a month or $700 a month on average in America on a car versus
or
half of that.
Insert any luxury item.
Any of the shit that you don't need, that you lose the fucking shiny effect after a week, doesn't make you feel good anymore, versus investing in a coach. Like, oh, yes, is it a luxury? On paper, maybe. But if you look at the state of the country and the world, no, it's not a luxury. It's a necessity. And that's why insurance is starting to look at this. We're in the early stages, which I'm very, very excited about. First positive trend in that industry I've seen in a long time, but they're looking at it. In the way you feel personally. So forget, luxury macro-wide, country-wide. When was the last time you felt good? When was the last time you enjoyed how you looked when you took your shirt off? That's not a luxury. You're either going to make the changes on your own. If you can't, you invest in someone who's going to help you through that. It's accountability. It's education. It's investing in yourself. I call it an online personal course. We learn about you. You learn about yourself. We fucking fix it. And then you take this for the rest of your life and you're good. And then you compound that. You accumulate that knowledge and play it off with your family the same way. So now they are being raised in a better environment that you want them to be as far as health and activity levels and feeling good. It's the ripple effect.
But you said something important before we wrap it up that I wanted to touch on is, moderation and what that looks like for you. It also is, that line is going to move as you go through different phases of your health and fitness journey. So when we started, I think back to when we started, we would probably argue that, let's say not focusing on nutrition at all, started clean eating, started tracking macros. That progression there, our moderation and our idea of moderation shifted so much from when we were clean eating. It was like, all right, I'm going to, my moderation is having a complete all out cheat day every single weekend. That's my moderation. In reality, that did not make us feel good at all. Then as we started tracking macros, we let go of that all or nothing with clean eating during the week, binging on whatever on the weekends. And we were a little bit more regular with how we ate. It was still a lot of good foods, but it was also still a lot of foods that weren't so great, but it was in moderation. It was just every day. Compared to now, I would not say that is what is moderation for us, because we're at the level where, okay, most of what we eat is single ingredient, nutrient dense foods. And then, here and there we sprinkle in things, ice cream with the family, pizza night, whatever. And it's just kind of like a little bit more rare, but it still happens. So you have to figure out where that line is for you. And
you and I had an argument about this a little while, a couple of years ago, whatever it was, about Kai. Like, oh, you grew up having a bowl of ice cream every night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, A, that's not moderation. We can agree on that. And B, with my gut issues and knowing how that makes me feel, I know he's probably got some of that in him as well. So it's not something that's going to be conducive to his overall health and his long-term health. A bowl of ice cream every day, even if it's small, it's not moderation. Yeah. A donut every day with breakfast is not moderation.
And I would agree with that. I would agree with that now.
I know you would now, but we had a big blow up over this thing.
We did.
But what is true moderation? If you look back at everything that you're doing, everything that you're consuming, the simplest way I can break this down, because again, we talked about individualization and personalization, is if you don't go buy those things regularly, they're not in your house, but when you want them, you go out and get them. And here's the key to that. If something's here, I'm going to eat it. If someone puts a cake in front of my face, if someone has ice cream, like, we're going to eat it until it's gone. So that's why we don't take desserts home.
We always say no to leftovers.
No, we have that one night, oh, take this with you. No, absolutely not. It stays there. I'm not taking it.
Yep.
If it's there, I'm going to eat it. If it's not, I'm not going to eat it. And I don't want it. Occasionally we'll come home and be like, you know what? It'd be nice to go out for ice cream or to do whatever. That's moderation. When your body tells you that you want it, then go get it. But if you have a lot of the good things in your house, quote unquote good things, for those of you who are going to be pissed off with the word good, whole food, nutrient dense options, that's what you're surrounding yourself with. That's what you're going to crave throughout the day, especially if you start getting good at making these simple but, tasty things for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks, whatever. And then when you say, you know what, I'm craving something, the kids are craving something, let's go have fun. Let's go have an experience together. We'll go do that once a week. Maybe it's twice once a week, and then it's not for a couple weeks. When you crave it, go do it, but don't surround yourself with it on a daily basis.
Yeah, your
to me, that's the
environment
easiest.
matters.
That's the easiest form of moderation.
Set up your environment to support whatever you're trying to do, even if it's going to feel strict at first, but that is often what it's going to take for a lot of you to start making changes. So,
anywho, you guys have our thoughts. You have our feelings. You are probably going to be more aware now when you see these things on social media on both sides, and I hope that you are. Take the tidbits that you want from it. Learn what true moderation is for you. We're going to wrap it up here. Where can they find you?
I'm at Alessandra Skutnik.
I'm at Josh Skutnik.